January 532. The city of Constantinople still breathes smoke. Petros of Antioch picks his way through streets where ash settles like gray snow upon the shoulders of the dead. But Nika riots have consumed the heart of the empire's greatest city. 40,000 lives extinguished in 5 brutal days. Where the old Hagia Sophia once stood, only scorched columns remain, fingers of ruin clawing toward a colorless sky. The air carries the iron tang of charred timber and something older, something sacred, now broken. Petros sets down his tools and looks upon the devastation with a mason's eyes, measuring not what is lost, but what must rise in its place. Emperor Justinian has summoned the impossible, a dome larger than any the world has ever seen. And somewhere beneath this consecrated ground, the earth is already keeping its secrets. In a tent thick with the scent of cedar shavings and lamp oil, Petros stands before the unrolled parchments of Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus. Men who think in mathematics where others think in faith. The plans are breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. A dome 31 meters across, lifted on 4 massive pendatives, seemingly kissing heaven without touching it. Petros traces the eastern foundation line with a calloused finger, feeling a mason's unease stir beneath his ribs. The soil there, he has pressed it himself, holds water like a wound. It shifts. It breathes. The architects listen with the polite patience of men who have already decided. Their equations are elegant, their confidence absolute. But stone does not argue with equations. Stone argues with truth. Petros rolls the parchment back and says nothing more. The foundation work continues at dawn. 3 weeks into the work, something shifts beneath Petros's hands. Deep in the eastern foundations, where old Roman concrete meets living earth, his chisel finds not resistance, but absence. A fissure, black and cold as a held breath, runs jagged through the bedrock, wider than a man's forearm, swallowing torchlight without return. The smell rising from it is ancient. Wet stone, iron, the exhalations of buried centuries. Around him, 1,000 workers sing, hammer, pray. None of them see it. Petros marks the stone with a mason's cross in red ochre, a private scripture only he can read, and says nothing. The weight of the dome Anthemius has promised the emperor 40 million pounds of marble, brick, and heaven itself will one day press directly above this wound. What Petros does next will determine whether that heaven stands or falls. Night after night, long after the other masons have retreated to their fires and prayers, Petros remains. The torchlight catches the sweat on his brow, the pale limestone dust settling into the creases of his weathered hands. Beside him, young Cosmas works in silent devotion, learning not from words, but from the patient rhythm of a master who refuses to let the stone betray them. They chip and pack and shore, 2 figures swallowed by the cathedral's vast, unfinished dark. There is no glory in this labor, no imperial witness to their sacrifice. Only the scrape of iron on ancient rock, the smell of mortar and burning pitch, and the quiet understanding that passes between a teacher and his student like a flame shared against the wind. But the fissure runs deeper than either man yet knows. The emperor arrives without warning, as emperors do. Justinian moves through the dust and clamor of the site like a figure from scripture. Purple silk catching the salt wind off the Bosphorus, his face carved into absolute certainty. 10,000 workers fall still. Petros watches from the scaffold above, the weight of his knowledge pressing against his ribs like a stone that cannot be set. He descends. He moves toward the imperial procession, but a court official, eyes sharp as iron styluses, steps into his path, reads the desperation on his face, and holds him there with nothing more than a glance. Justinian passes within 30 feet, trailing incense and empire, seeing only the heaven he is building. Petros watches the purple disappear beyond the marble threshold, knowing the flaw beneath them waits for no emperor's schedule. Then the night speaks. Timber screams against stone. The eastern scaffold. 3 months of labor. 1,000 carefully mortised joints. Buckles with a sound like the breaking of the world. Torches scatter. Dust rises in billowing clouds, pale as bone meal, swallowing the stars above the Bosphorus. Workers scramble across shifting rubbles, their oil lamps cutting wild arcs through the choking dark. Miraculously, mercifully, no man is crushed beneath the fallen timber. But the eastern wall has moved, fractionally, catastrophically, undeniably. Petros stands at the edge of the devastation, his warnings vindicated in the worst possible way, his hands trembling not with fear but with the terrible weight of having been right. By torchlight, the architects Anthemius and Isidore are summoned. What they will find in those foundations will change everything. In the lamplit chamber above the nave, mathematics and mortal fear collide. Petros spreads his markings across a rough limestone slab. Crude diagrams scratched in charcoal, trembling but precise. The architects Anthemius and Isidore lean close, their shadows pooling together like dark water. The air smells of tallow smoke and wet plaster, the eternal breath of a building still becoming itself. Petros traces the hidden fissure with a calloused finger, a wound beneath the eastern pier that no official eye has sanctioned him to find. The imperial overseer rises, his silk robes catching the firelight, authority hardening his face into something ancient and cold. But Petros holds his ground. Lead-bedded stones, arranged in a compression ring. An elegant mercy offered to a structure already groaning under heaven's weight. Tonight the fate of the dome rests not in an emperor's decree, but in whether one mason's courage survives the morning. High above the Bosphorus, in the bitter clarity of a January morning, the last stone finds its place. Petros stands on trembling scaffolding, mortar-dusted hands gripping cold timber, and watches 40 pendentives carry the impossible weight of heaven itself. The great dome, 180 feet above the marble floor, seems to float, suspended not by stone alone but by something older, something unnamed. Light pours through 40 windows ringing its base, dissolving the boundary between solid matter and divine fire. Below, 10,000 workers fall silent. The years of secrecy, of fear, of impossible calculations scratched into wax tablets by lamplight, all of it narrows to this single, suspended breath. Petros weeps, and does not know whether from exhaustion or awe, but the dome is finished, and in 3 days, an emperor will arrive to consecrate it. December 537. The air inside Hagia Sophia hangs thick with frankincense and candlelight, 10,000 flames trembling beneath a dome that should not exist. Justinian enters weeping, arms raised toward a heaven made of stone and gold and human will. Petros stands among the multitude, mason, witness, keeper of a terrible secret, his calloused palm pressed flat against a marble panel he himself shaped in the quarry dust of a distant morning. The dome breathes above them, its ring of 40 windows flooding the nave with winter light so pure it seems to fall from somewhere beyond the sky. He feels the stone's coolness, its absolute stillness, and understands that it is holding. It is holding. What Petros cannot yet know is that the secret buried beneath his feet is about to find its way upward. The great ceremony has passed. The bishops have gone. The emperor's gold has been counted and blessed. But Petros returns alone, in the blue hour before dawn, when Constantinople belongs only to the gulls and the ancient stone. He carries a single chisel, not the broad iron of construction, but the fine point he reserves for delicate work. Kneeling at the base of the eastern column, he works by instinct and touch, pressing his name into the limestone in careful Greek letters. The stone dust falls warm against his knuckles. It is not vanity that drives the blade. It is something older, more desperate. The need of every mortal man to press himself against eternity and whisper, "I was here. I held this." The marks are shallow, deliberate, already half hidden in shadow. And yet what Petros cannot know is that the secret buried in the foundations has not stayed silent.